Hello everyone, welcome to this evening's episode. This evening's episode has found me before I have found it, and really, I wanted to speak about the idea of religion, and of course, respectfully, with the elegance of the philosopher's vision. Before I begin in explaining the title, The Future of the Religious Method, I wanted to first say, what is a method? And sometimes in anything a person looks at, in order to understand it, they have to see how it came about, where it came from. That means any problem any person has, and they have a sort of feeling before the problem was here. In other words, all problems have a sort of source. As if you find someone in a store, there's a source, there's something pulling them there, And so, I want to read for the audience what the dictionary has to say about method, the word method. A particular procedure for accomplishing or approaching something. So pretty much we're creatures, we're objects that have become subjects to ourselves through this massive process of evolution. Somehow we have become subjects to ourselves. And so, what does a subject inside an object do? It attempts to move. And so you can say a method is an approach, and there has never been any other ideology. There has just been human beings that have never existed before attempting or approaching the world accessibly. Sorry guys, the volume of the song before was too loud. Anyways. So pretty much a brain emerged, then personhood emerged from the secular perspective, if we look at it. A brain emerged, then personhood emerged, then language emerged, then language was revealed. From this episode is focusing on religion. So language was revealed, and an approach became the outcome. That means I think about my life before all the information I have now about it. And I see that I was opinionless. That we actually are beings that move prior to opinion, and sometimes our movement generates our opinion. So you can say that the idea of revelation is some sort of activity, if we are to look at the idea from a theological viewpoint. And so, of course, anybody listening this episode, I am pretty much sharing my ideas and experiences with the concept of religion, where it was, where it has come, and where it is going. And ultimately, why the ultimate command is don't fear your species, because that is what is causing war. And war is pretty much, you put a glass of water in a room filled with thirsty people and they all try to get it at the same time. That becomes war, right? So the reason, just to say it in case, if I may connect to it later on a different way, really the future of the religious method in the outer realms, if we don't realize we are separate from the language, it's going to be Hunger Games. Pretty much all religious ideology, just like how a cell replicates a gene, we have self-replicating genes. You can say there are ideologies on this planet that they self-replicate. The reason they self-replicate is because a cell, the reason the idea self-replicates is because a self has arose as a vessel. So in some sense, you can say poetically, all my ideology that I'm sharing in these talks, they are living in my brain. Do you see what I mean? You know, I'm saying that they are housed in the attention that gives life to the idea. That means think of all the objects since you have kept with yourself from the beginning of your life till now. For example, I don't know, I had a rock collection when I was young. I still have that, you know. So it's as if it was an object that, due to my choice and attention, continued for me. And I feel that when it comes to ideology, and especially religious ideology, and really it is in some sense a subject that is self-replicating through experience. That means people experience something, they have a context, and the experience is the main concept, you could say the main event. And so you can say the echoes of truth is an echo of an illusion, you can say. Illusion is the echo of a truth. That's how I meant to say it. Both are possible, but the other one is in a different context. So pretty much objects, there was just a world of an object. This object moved, this object became aware of itself, it became a subject to itself, and then the subject began moving. And now when people are like, what is the purpose of life? What is the meaning of life? What gives me morality and all of this? It has come to how a subject moves. That means I feel in 2020, perhaps people are more looking at how they need to be a subject than how they're being an object. You know? And of course, there's all kinds of people on this planet. Something to share from my own life. I was born in Iran, and there was a religious environment, Muslim, Shia religious environment. And I remember that when I was young, I did not even, in some sense, I knew that ideas were around, but I never double checked what ideas really mean to me as a being. And I can tell you that before we can even say the purpose of a specific idea, a method is an approach. That means, in some sense, you can say religious circles are looking at the world and they're like, God's moving all of this. Do you see? It's an approach to the moment, And there are some who look at the moment and their approach to the moment is not like, no, the God's not moving all of this. I am moving all of this in accordance to my choice and whatnot, you know? either we are moving the world or the world is moving us. And I will tell you that religion is in some sense perceiving the world moving what's in it, but in accordance to a specific narrative context. So what it means is that all religions have their own generated linguistic view. And there are, of course, common denominators. You see, human beings are fascinated by the known. How long can we be fascinated by the known? Eventually, you get bored of the known at some point, and you eventually wonder about the unknown. Just like how, let's say, a real estate agent, you're checking out a house, and the real estate agent shows you one room. You don't stay in one room of a house you want to see the whole of. And the issue is that ideology and language is replacing free will. And the issue is free will is not for a thought. You can say it's not we are not a thought thinking that it's a thought, that doesn't make sense. There is a space accompanying every change, usually. Everything that changes, it's noticed through the space. I feel the issue with human communication, human awareness to the realm, has simply been that we have actually have not considered an inner realm. It's as if people feel they're one person, and where should this person go, or what will happen to this person, and everything is through a sort of self-centered ethnocentrism. If we imagine 8 billion human beings right now, religious, non-religious, whatever theatrical performance of language dwells behind your eyes. I feel our species, human beings, okay. So, the future of the religious method in the outer realms is Hunger Games. Because we're thinking we're just a creature in the outer realms, we are ignoring the problem by not even acknowledging that it exists. That means if somebody wants to solve a problem, they have to go, in some sense, see what the problem is. But imagine there's a house burning and the person, in some sense, says they can't see. It's like a house burning. It's like standing inside a burning house and being like, no, I don't see anything burning. So that's the issue. And so I feel we have to enter the homeland of the idea to comprehend it from how it is starting to itself. So what I'm trying to say, excuse me, is that human beings should consider an outer realm and an inner realm. Like very concretely, to a point where if you're asked if you are religious or if you are whatever, let's say if you're asked if you're Buddhist, the proper response should be in some sense like, in my inner realms, I have had patterns that resemble experiences familiar to Buddhism. Do you see? It's rather than the person being like, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Superman, is in some sense, we cannot be ideas, but we can share them, And if we are treated as an idea, as an unchanging design, that means, let's say you see, whoever's listening, let's say you see someone and you get a sense this person is a bad person, or you get a sense this person is a good person. Now that, imagine that first impression remains. Imagine you only got one impression from people, and that was it. You decided based on your first impression of someone who they are, It's as if all the other moments you would see them, you would dismiss who else they were. You see? And what I feel is happening is that we are trying to be a subject when we are not subjects. And so it doesn't matter what instruction manual you're given. It's at the end of it, it comes down to how much of this world did you really see? To think you are language in this world is to be an idealist. That means every system, ideological system, is treating itself as ideal, for if it wasn't, it would have already integrated with a greater system. So we can say any system of thought that sticks around, it's because it has an ego. And you can say the religious view method, similar to the scientific method, its response to some set of landscape. From the scientific angle, in some sense, we see in accordance to the world changing. That means it's phenomenal that when one looks at science, you're fascinated by, in some sense, how much the world changes and nothing is set in stone, even the idea of the language, of the word we have created of stone, So in some sense, nothing is set. I feel secular society is pretty much treating a knowledge like a software that's endlessly updating. Now, I feel that you can say more religious or more archaic, because people have to realize it's so easy to talk behind the back of a 6th century ideology, because it is not here. But in some sense, the intensity of the events of history just suggests where the attention went. That means, look at this wallpaper I've shown. This wallpaper is showing that it's like so many years in the future, these Hare Krishna monks are still around. So you see, it's as if eventually, whether it's AI moving as a robot in our streets, imagine in the future as robots are like walking among us. Now, then imagine it's like this monk, whether it's like one AI program controlling the monks or one, you can say, world euler. World, you can say one, um, one natural presence that is keeping the human activity going. Pretty much, I feel what has happened is that in the 6th century, the idea of oneness was touched upon through the concept of the religious salvation towards the inconceivable. Now, what has happened is that modern society feels language from the 6th century can own concepts. You see, it's as if we have to see the language in another layer and the existence on another level. Do you know? The mind and body should be seen as separate. Even though we cannot fathom what that means because our mind is projected from our brain. So the only way we can treat it is just to somehow feel like antennas. I would consider that would be sort of spontaneously feeling like an antenna. That means it's like if the person cares for themselves, their attention gets to see only their self. If the person cares for the world, their attention gets to see the world. If their attention cares for that which is unknown, you get to see the unknown. And so, whatever ideological system raises its voice and tries to be, for me, the only way I feel really bold things should be said in some sense, like it has to connect to an let's call it a, I don't know, I'll create a word for it, an automata question. An ultimate question. I'm this person in these talks, just some guy on this planet, a billion trillion stars around in this universe, And I've been talking about, usually in most of my talks, I drive the conversation, I fly the conversation towards an advanced civilization. But I thought about it, what if, let's say, 100 years pass, I'm no longer here, and then thousands of years pass, what would people do with this idea? And I realized underneath any sort of rationality of acceptance of the ideology, there is an emotional life. So think of it that it's not about just how you move as an object here. It's not just about how the subject is witnessed to move. It is also about how the subject feels while it is being an object. I feel we have been duped by images that we never were. People may try making anything into a religion. I could literally think of the religious, it's literally an algorithm. It can be copy-pasted. Do you know? So you can copy-paste a method that's done before. For example, somebody back in the day found a way to make fire. Other people saw that way to make fire. And how many different systems do we have right now that in some sense ignite? And so I will tell you, this world is very strange because the past is trying so hard to pass the torch of knowledge to the future, but at the same time, the future, in some sense, has to, in some sense, you know what it is? I shouldn't say it's passing the torch. I would say it's like this giant torch, and every generation, every point in history is like carrying this torch, and they're adding flames to it, and then they pass on. So we've been passing down this snowball effect of a growing knowledge base for the species. And I'm telling you, do you think we will, as a species, ever get to a moment, how incredible would it be, where just like how we see a bird fly in the sky past you, you know, or just as, you know, like the leaves of the wind blowing the leaves of a tree, you know, or a squirrel moving. These are, imagine you treated the subjects that would come to your mind like that. There's a phrase here. I'm like looking at the Apple dictionary on the MacBook, and it says there is method in someone's madness. And it says like what this phrase means. Oh, it's from Shakespeare's Hamlet. So from Shakespeare, oh my God, the dictionary is quoting Shakespeare. So in Shakespeare's Hamlet, it says, there's a saying there where it says there's method in someone's madness, and it's defined as there is a sensible foundation for what appears to be foolish or strange behavior. You know, it's like, just like how many parents, they speak to their children and try to tell their children about the nature of the world, you know, how the world is. There is the body's life, there's the mind's life. The mind's life can limit the body's life, and also the body's life can limit the mind's life. For example, me smoking, that's limiting my mind's life, you know? But my mind simultaneously is trying to unlimit my body's life, you know? Yet change is the ultimate. That means the truth of the changeless is change, the truth of the changing is changeless. And what is seen as reincarnation is literally a waltz between chaos and order. If every person was conscious of their mind's life, of how right now as I'm speaking, the one who's listening is a subject, but it's a subject starting from the first person viewpoint of the body's eyes. And so if you were to close your eyes, yet if you could still see something, that is what I'm calling the inner realms, where imagination, memory, and visualization happens, whether your eyes are open or closed, it doesn't matter. The fact that your eyes can open and close, and you can keep visualizing I would tell you that's the biggest sign that imagination is not in the outer realms. Imagination is in a non-local room, you know? And can you imagine? Can you imagine language? You know, sorry guys, it's like when I speak, I see landscapes, inner landscapes, and then I have to cherry pick which one I want to talk about. So in the think of it that I'm painting with words rather than a linear kind of up the hill approach of explanation. Your inner realms, when you realize they're nobody's business unless you're done with the business, you're done with your inner realms. So I would say if you don't, here's the thing, imagine 3 types of people. Person 1 believes only they are a body. Person 2 believes they are a body plus mind. Person 3 believes they are a body plus mind plus soul. Okay, 3 people sitting in one room. One thinks it's just pure matter. One thinks it's like an immaterial phenomena is experiencing the matter. One is thinking there is something even beyond the observed and the observer. So we're gonna see, let's say person 1, person 2, person 3, these 3 people had a conversation. They started having a conversation about the world. You would see that person 2 and 3, they have another additional dimension of speech that person 1 doesn't. You see, this is something that I feel it's so huge that we imagined reality and then decided that reality shouldn't change, there's reality, you know? And when we really stay in reality, it goes back to imagination. So in a numerical way, this thing I said about person 1, person 2, person 3, you can say person 1 only believes in 0 and 1. You can say person 2 believes in 0, 1, and 2. Person 3 believes in 0, 1, 2, and infinity. The soul is not a mole that you can just whack away, you know? It's not whack-a-mole. It's it's the secret of the living observable. It is the unknown. Yeah, the soul is unknown. Literally, it's the unknown. We are travelers inside a space-time continuum that is occurring inside our eyes. And we are just going along with the program that we know. You know, it's kind of strange. I will be honest, there's been many moments in my life where I have been a coward. You know, I have learned from my own cowardice. But I will tell you, one thing is strange. That because the first thing we know is the observable universe, and the unobservable universe, we don't know what it is. It's literally an opportunity cost. We fear the why question when we want the how to be in a specific way. We fear the how question when the why is more important than the how. A method should be used as long as sincere efficiency is accessible. If we for a moment thought that every ideological system is glasses, it's glasses that people are wearing. Somebody says, I believe in this, that's the way they're looking at the world. Its future is that we must keep religion in the inner realms, and in some sense, not just religion, any ideology that wants to convert everything into itself. That means, imagine there are different flowers in a garden, and one of the flowers is like, there should be only lilies, you know, and the lily flower becomes a dictator, you know. And so imagine then the rose is like, no, there should be only the rose is the truth, you know. And let's say somebody like sunflower seeds it. They say like the sunflower is the truth. Look at the geometry, you know. So, do we want to live in a world where we want a multidimensional access? Do we want a world of clones? Or do we want a world where we have novel beings? And so this is where I would say, if one can say also something when I gotta really point out about the inner realms and outer realms. Another way of you can say it is the personal and the impersonal. That which is in the domain of your personhood, and that which is beyond the domain of your personhood. For me, I stepped out of the linguistic simulation in 2011, and when the world realizes language is art, The playful will find the peaceful earth first. Excuse me. The personal dimensions of our life, just like in our imagination, we have freedom of speech, and in order to have freedom of speech, we have the sort of freedom of ability to perceive, to see. Behind your eyes, you are free to fathom anything. But in front of your eyes, there are certain things that never need to leave the inner realms, like anger. It's as if two rooms. There's the body's room, then there's the mind's room. And in the mind's room, you can be religious, you can move in whatever way. Your inner realms, there's an unconditional freedom there. But in the outer realms, we have to do what's makes sense to the collective and to the individual. So religion is, in some sense, I'll tell you, it's as if just being a participant. If it wants to be in the outer realms, it will feel like a participant because it's it's an idea that doesn't want to change, and yet all our technologies are based on changing ideas. So religion is treating the ideological system, due to its unchanging nature, is a statue. So I feel like ideological systems treated like artwork, or you can say methods. You know, it's either a human being that the world has never seen before gets to live, or a human being that just lived like the past, you know. And it's like, unless the present understands that the past has to accept its moment in time, the future will not arrive. The best thing that can happen, that means, like, let's think of religious ideology as ancient ideology. Now let's think of whoever's listening, think of modern ideology as being like in thousands of years in the future, ancient ideology. And so just like a religious ideological system has is an echo of the past, the echo has continued to this very day. It's as if the human being wondering about our own echo, and so ultimately it has to touch the story of the truth of the universe. That means there's there's a coffee cup here, and the moment I relate this coffee cup to the universal, it can be, in some sense, turned into a narrative, a universal narrative. It's like honor the past, honor the future, and the present is probably honoring it. Guys, can you imagine something hilarious? Imagine in the future, religious institutions have somehow managed to imagine they're still around, and so there's androids walking in the street. And can you imagine like androids being converted to religion? You know, it's honestly a narrative. That means it's like if you are reading, if you're holding the message for your whole life, you didn't understand the message. Do you know? That means really it's in some sense like if our attention is on the message, it's not on the truth. The message cannot be the truth. The message shows the truth, points to the truth, but it cannot be the truth. It's like that saying where they say, when I point at the stars, don't look at the tip of my finger. Can you imagine telling a robot to meditate? The robot will look at us and after an analysis say that it is way more Zen than us. Imagine a Zen analysis. Imagine advanced robots in the future. They just scan a person, and they're like, this person is, at 70% Zenhood. It's like their Zen level is. You know what it is? It's like, first we must be responsible for the self, and by being responsible for the self, we are getting the training. As if imagine when a person advances who they are in some sense technically as an attributeless moment of mind. Do you know, watching receiving training of how they are keeping themselves alive. Imagine you wanted a human being that you could learn from, you know, and imagine now that human being is the human being in the mirror. You have been learning from yourself. Everybody has been learning from himself from the beginning. So we, in some sense, train in the individual. The responsibility of the self becomes the training grounds for the responsibility of the collective, of the world. And of course, guys, this is such a big topic. I'm just gonna make this part one, and in the future, there's gonna be other parts too. So thanks for listening. Much blessings and rest. And of course, one last thing I'm going to say, which Aristotle said, it's the sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. Why? Because there is so much more left. And it's as if there is this idea is something doesn't make sense even in the religious narrative. This is Mr. Within, so you can say commentary on. You see, the issue with religion is that the religious people love God, worship God, focus on God, and they are devoted to God, yet they are not devoted to God's creation. Everything is God's creation. So imagine you're saying, all right, the boss owns this whole place. And then there's some employees fighting with other employees in the company. And they're like, no, we know what the boss said. And then the other employees are like, no, we know what the boss said. And there's just this massive kind of dissonance, like this disharmony, just echoing more than it had to. For me, it's as if this world is big enough and there's enough intelligent people on this planet to design a system of multidimensional tolerance and all violence and chaotic intensity pushed in the inner realms, and the way we push it is we speak. That means, imagine that there's a person A and person B are about to fight, and then person C out of nowhere, person C comes and says, hey guys, why don't you guys see? Imagine person C says to person A and B, instead of fighting like animals, instead of like biting with your fists, do you know? Discourse and bridge building between inner realms. For me, it was there are some things that I would say are intellectually sad. That it's as if, like, imagine nobody had imagine you went into this parallel universe traveling machine, and you came into a universe, okay, where Edison hadn't invented the light bulb yet, and you'd be like, no way, we could have built the light bulb this whole time in this parallel universe, Poetically speaking, the dogs of other dimensions could have been released here if we entertain a sort of parallel realmhood. A method is a tool. A tool has a utility. Once the utility is satisfied, like once the person has used the tool for what they wanted, you don't need the tool. Once you've read the message, you don't need the message, do you know? You don't need to read it again, do you know? Unless the message wasn't understood in the first time, Some things the person can try to figure out, some things the person could have attempted in any way to figure out, they could have never known that unknown variable. So for me, whether I'm standing on a bus or not, life feels like a sort of momentum, a movement. The conscious waking state is just controlled movement. It's like 50% automated, 50% not automated. In the dream state, for most people, and for me, even most of the time when I dream, it's automated. I've had certain dreams where it hasn't been automated. But in the deep sleep state, in some sense, that's as if you have slept on like a train in the sky, it's we have been conditioned into uh, playing offense first, then defense, you know? And I would tell you, how fascinating is it that people have been speaking to each other for 250,000 years, you know? And we have never seen each other's eyes. We have seen what each person is allowed to step out from their innermost. And in an artificial, you can say, societal field, to be yourself means to be a human being no one has ever seen before. Nobody has their DNA. Nobody knows who you are, what you are. That's the cool thing of life. Imagine the future in advanced civilization, they would instantly know who the person is. They would welcome it. In the future, I feel there should be this thing that we build an advanced civilization that gives more energy than it takes. If it takes a lot of energy to be in civilization, then people will in some sense just want to go into a bunker. There was a scholar, a sage, who he had been in many rooms where when death had come, and this scholar said that the biggest regret at the end of the game of this life is that the person wasn't kinder to the world. To be a self in a changing world means to be in a world that's changing itself all the time. It's hilarious. It's like now what awaits is the great flight of minds. The first thing is to get the think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And first we're trying to get the physiological needs of the species kind of figured out. Poverty, shelter, health, and all this, so clean water, for example, fresh air, all this. Then from these physiological needs, imagine we managed to make every hungry child in the world no longer hungry, and it was all like all good on that dimension. Then all these people who now have their physiological needs satisfied, they're going to want a psychological need. Do you know? They're now, after your body is content, your mind wants to live. Do you know? Do you know? So it's reaching the point where we have to quickly, very quickly, as soon as we can, and I'm telling you, it can be literally done with 10 years if the species gives a shit. You know? That's it. It's so instant that we have to just kind of realize imagination is the boundary of reality. In the same way, reality is a boundary for imagination. Do you know? That means when I wonder about what is real to me, it's as if this view of reality, I wasn't here and then I arrived in the world and now this view is here. Do you know? And so it's as if like it's all about how the attention has divided and conquered the sensory perception into a landscape of journeying to journey. And I know, guys, I said I'm going to end it with these ideas. So can be shared. A Sufi story, this merchant, this is back in the day, somewhere, imagine in the Middle East. And this caravan is going between villages and this merchant. And he takes his caravan and he goes to this village. And it's like this very simple village and people run. It's as if like a divine event. Nobody ever came to that village. This merchant came there. This merchant comes there and he's like, people, what do you need? You know, and everybody comes and in some sense, like some people pay, and there's this one person who he can't pay for something, do you know? And he's looking at the merchant and he's like, I'll give you this amount, man. I have this much, right? And the merchant looks at him and he sees the merchant sees he doesn't really need the money. So what he does in some sense, he looks at the guy and he in some sense says okay, and I don't know, does something, like he does some kindness. I think he doesn't take anything from the guy and he just just gives the thing to him. Okay, and the guy is so happy by this that he's like, all right, man, I don't have anything, like, thanks for doing this, I'll tell you one thing, as if he's trying to give something back. And he says there's a person at the edge of this town where it's a Sufi, you know, a sort of dervish is at the edge of this town living here, very insightful kind of hermit, you know, mystic. And so this guy, and the person says he's kind of like a, you know, someone whose heart is open, and go talk to him, you know. This merchant, after like, you know, finishing up with the customers, he goes at the end and he sees it's the, you know, the poorest house in there, and it's kind of like very, like literally you could say Shrek tree bark. like a tree bark door, do you know what I mean? Okay, maybe not that low. But anyways, the guy knocks on the door and this Sufi opens the door, and the Sufi welcomes the guy inside, you know, and says, welcome, and, you know, the merchant sits down and he starts setting up tea, like to drink tea and see why the merchant is gone. The merchant is sitting there, you know, this businessman, and he looks at the guy's room and he sees, oh my god, this guy has only a mat, and he has, what do you call it, a lamp, and just a kettle. And that's it, that's all he has in the room, you know? He looks at the Sufi as the dervish as he's pouring the tea, and he gives the tea to the merchant. The merchant, you know, they're both about to drink tea, and right there, the merchant looks at him and says, um, "My friend, where's your furniture?" And the moral of that story, pretty much, guys, it just got disconnected. So bear with me here. The moral of the story is pretty much we're all travelers. We are unknown sight traveling through some world. And as a traveler, you don't get defined by where you're traveling. You're just passing through. We are journeying through space and time as a conscious being. And so ideological systems can really make human beings fight one another. But the language is winning. The human beings should win. So what that means is we should see a human dimension that surpasses uh, the clothing of the mind, which is ideology. So the future is in some sense how the present evolved. The linguistic simulation could be hiding like the collectivity. The value, the true value of the collectivity of like one species rhythmically advancing, you know? Anyways, thanks for listening. Much blessings.